Welcome to Creative Conversations. I'm Roger Humphrey. In this episode, I'm pleased to welcome the guitarist-composer David Day. David has recently released his fourth album, but it's his first classical guitar album. It's called Sketches of Michigan. I had the privilege of hearing David perform parts of this live last December, and I really enjoyed it a lot. Please join us, an old guy in the twilight of his career, talking with a young guy at the outset of his. Before we begin, please hit the like, follow, or subscribe buttons, and all of the other buttons as you happen to see down there. It's an easy thing to do, and it really does help the channel a lot. Also, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Your opinion is very important to me. And we are welcoming to the program guitarist, composer, David Day. Hi, David.
Hey, Roger. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. I appreciate you taking the time today to do this. Stuff to talk about. I suppose the first thing we ought to say is we've met.
Yes.
That's not always the case with my guests. And I heard you play last December and asked you then if you'd like to be on the show. As a composer, you played excerpts from Sketches of Michigan, which is an album of yours. Is that correct?
That's right. That's my most recent album. It's my fourth album, but it is my first all classical guitar solo album.
Oh, so what have you normally done?
Well, I've incorporated the classical guitar in a couple of the albums, but mostly ensemble work, small different types of ensembles with strings and some winds, and I'll collaborate with different composers in the area.
Cool. So this is album number 4, but album number 1 in terms of just straight classical guitar.
That's right. It's not the only thing I'll do moving forward, but I've sort of pivoted in the last 5 years towards making the classical guitar my primary instrument. So I will be doing some more classical guitar focused records.
Yeah, I think I remember back when I was your age. God, I hate that phrase. But back when I was your age, I kind of went through that a little bit of trying this and trying that, and finally figuring out what fit. It's like an old pair of shoes. You find a pair that fits and you just stay with them. So
yeah. There's a lot I could say about what brought me to the guitar. I do more than anything else love how it's really just the player connected to the instrument. That's what really did.
Right. I was attracted to the guitar way back early, in the 50s, when I was a young boy, and I remember seeing Les Paul and Mary Ford on television. And I was just totally intrigued, and so if you've ever seen any of those old clips,
I have with Les Paul.
I'm sorry.
I've seen some Les Paul clips.
Yeah, but Mary Ford was just about as good as he was. I was his wife.
I haven't had the chance to see her play. I'll have to look that.
They had their own television show, so there are a few YouTube clips of the two of them playing, two or three of them,
okay.
and people know the Les Paul name from the Gibson guitar that actually he invented.
Right.
But they don't really realize that he was a real guy, and he was an amazing player.
Yes.
I mean, scary good. And, so anyway, so I got interested in the guitar back then, and I discovered the nylon string, I guess. I'd never really thought of nylon strings being a legit instrument. I was strumming and singing, and I had a 12-string guitar and beat the daylights out of that, and I, in the late 60s, got interested in nylon string and just fell in love with the sound and the feel. I mean, just everything about that guitar. And I've pretty much been a nylon string guy ever since then.
That's amazing. It's demanding, isn't it? I mean, compared to other guitars, I've had the most difficulty with the nylon. It's someone told me right before one of the very first concerts that I gave. Right before I went on, he said, it's tough playing the nylon guitar in front of people. It's like they can hear you think.
I think that's probably true. I've never heard it said that way before, but yeah, there's number one, there's an intimacy there.
Yeah.
You sit down with when I used to do the folk music, there felt like there was a bit of a disconnect, this invisible wall. But with the nylon string guitar, it's like they're in your living room. You know,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
very, very close, very intimate sound. And because it's a quieter instrument, they sort of have to lean in a little bit to hear it, you know.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
so that brings them in even closer. So, but there's just something a warmth about it that, you know, I played steel string for a long time and 12 string for a while, and in the nylon string there's a warmth there that uh, I don't even know how to explain it better than that. It's like taking a towel out of the dryer, you know.
It's cozy. It's nice, and I think that's part of its like superpower in a way is the fact that it does draw people into the sound. You have to pay attention, but also it invites the attention too. It's very comfortable to hear. Um, it's hard as the player, I think, to direct that like to not project your own discomfort because for me it is such a physically challenging
Yes.
getting the tone proper at such a consistent clip. I think like the millimetric precision, not having um, unharmonious sympathetic resonance, you know, different issues that come up that require a lot of careful attention can kind of betray the intimacy and that projecting that feeling as a performer. I find myself spending a lot more time when I prepare a piece to play for people on that aspect rather than simply getting through the notes and dynamics and phrases.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think that when I played steel string guitar when I was singing, I felt like I had more room to goof up and a little more latitude and a little more freedom in that regard. But I found that in playing classical music and nylon string guitar and even arrangements of popular songs on nylon string guitar, it felt I had to be more exact, a little more precise. I can't imagine anybody taking an approach to the piano the way I did with steel string instruments. But I can with every note on the nylon string guitar. It's very pianistic in that regard.
It is true. Did you ever go back to the steel string for a time?
Well, no, but I'll tell you why, and for the same reason I never I owned an electric guitar once when I was very young, and for about 20 minutes. It's just and I realized I like the sound, but I can't think that way, and but I've spent a good part of my career teaching music out of a couple of major music stores,
Okay.
and so anytime I had that twitch, I could go over there and just sit down and pound on one of their guitars for a while, and that kind of scratched the itch a little bit. So I didn't have to own it to play one, you know, and so I could play some of the nicest guitars in the world for free,
That's great.
and so yeah, that worked out really well. But I could sit and play for 10 or 15 minutes, and within 10 or 15 minutes, I really had a hankering to get my own guitar back in my hands again. The bloom was off the rose that quick for me, and it's interesting because I've listened to other people play both acoustic steel string and, and electric guitars and things like that, and I really admire them and really enjoy the sound they get and the playing they do and so on. But I just I find that because I don't really care to imitate that or be
Yeah.
that I can listen to it like a civilian. I can just listen to the music without trying to figure out how they did that.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely an issue. I find myself not listening to as much guitar music these days for the same reason. One of my favorite, I don't know if young guy, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a modern classical guitar performer, Mateusz Kowalski. He's a Polish guy.
I think I've seen the name, but I don't know anything about him.
I know he's been on some of, I think he's been on the Sikas Guitars channel and maybe that a few others. He's one of my favorite players from my generation.
Uh
Just
huh.
just incredible technique. The way he does Bach, the 1006 E major prelude. I watched that video probably 50 times just trying to study how he phrased it. But when I'm just casually, I got into the Julian Bream Bach record, that blue one. That was one of the first records I was
Yeah,
listening to.
yeah.
Um, it's hard for me now to listen after having studied it for some years and getting my hands around the instrument. It's hard for me to turn that side of it off and just enjoy it like I used to, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't. I think it. I enjoy it, but I enjoy it at a different level. You know, I mean, I wasn't even playing classical guitar until I was 22 or 23, 22 I guess, when I even thought about trying to play it. And what attracted me to that was the Julian Bream Bach album, the two lute suites,
Oh
and
yeah.
and I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was just I was just absolutely mesmerized. I just about wore, and of course that's on vinyl, and I just about wore that thing out, you know. And that's when I really decided that's what I wanted to do. I had, you know, just I had played other things, and I kind of went through a Charlie Bird period where I was trying to play some light jazz and things like that, and none of it really resonated with me like the Bach, you know, and listening to Bream play. And every time that man picked up a guitar, and I was fortunate enough to see him in concert twice, and
Really?
yeah,
That's
and
amazing. Did he play any
fascinating.
Bach?
I'm sorry.
Did he play any Bach?
No, I don't recall him playing it. Like the second time, I don't. The first time I heard him play, he played the first half of the program. He did it all on the lute.
Really?
I'd never even seen a lute up close before, and so that was kind of cool. But and I don't really recall the second half of the program, to be honest. The second time I heard him play was 8 years later, and and he was premiering on that tour. He was premiering Tippett's Blue Guitar, and that was audiences didn't really take to it. The audience that I was, you know, it was very difficult. The first half of the program, I he did a couple of Renaissance pieces, some Dellin, I believe. I don't believe there was any Bach involved. Did a piece by Soar, larger concert work, and trying to remember which one it was right now. But anyway, and then in the second half, he came out with some small piece that he played, and then he played the Tippett's piece, which is about 20-25 minutes long. And I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I don't think I've heard that one.
It's buckle up. It's just about everything you hate about contemporary music, classical music. I mean, it's just very angular, very difficult.
Oh,
There
I
are
see.
people that really, really love it, and Bream, of course, championed that stuff. You know, he was doing Henze and Tippett and so many other pieces that these big pieces that were just really hard uh, it was hard for me to wrap my little pea brain around, and so,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I find myself going to Bream for the tonal stuff. Definitely, I really, I hear some. I've heard a couple of those recordings, like a little bit, and I haven't quite developed an ear maybe for that type of stuff. I like his Bach a lot. That Blue album we mentioned,
yeah.
the Lute Suites. I don't know if you recall. There's an old video. I think it's in black and white of Julian at a party, and he was a very young man in this recording. He was playing the Bach BWV 999, the Little Prelude, and transposed to D minor.
Uh-huh.
That was one of the first videos I saw too.
Yeah, that's he was, and what you see and what you heard on those albums are pretty much the way he was live. I mean, that right hand was like a shark; it was on the move all the time. He pulled just about every sound out of the guitar imaginable. I haven't seen anything like that, or I hadn't seen anything like that until Kazuhito Yamashita. He is a very colorful player as well. And are you familiar with his work?
If it's who I'm thinking of, I'm not exactly sure, but if it's who I'm thinking of, I know I've seen. He's widely regarded as one of the best performers of
Yeah,
all.
yeah. I saw him perform live, and it was just he did Dvorak's New World Symphony on a guitar. Who does that? Who else has got the hands for that? And but again, he just pulls sounds out of the guitar that you didn't even know existed. You know, so that's
Wow.
it's pretty amazing. I hope that anybody who happens to be watching this will take some time and check some of these people out, because you know, when you see somebody like Tommy Emmanuel, for example, who's very good at what he does, but you know, it's two dimensional compared to these guys.
That's the nylon. It's hard to compare art forms and disciplines, right? But I
That's
do,
true.
because with Tommy, I feel like I really love his ability to. And I grew up improvising a lot with friends, and certainly not in any serious. It was all
Uh-huh.
very silly. We would be free. We wouldn't really be strict about anything. As you get older, things get a little more serious. But definitely the nylon. I mean, pulling expression and sound is more so. I think the angle of that art form, whereas what Tommy does seems obviously he does a lot of highly technical and highly sonorous things, but then also it's the improvisation, which is remarkable.
I also like with his playing, I also like his ability to connect with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I fear that although I didn't see that in your performance, but I do fear that many of us are somewhat disconnected from our audiences. Walk out, sit down, play, get up, leave. You know, take kind of a take it or leave it attitude. You're very personable on stage, which I found to be a nice change.
I appreciate that. It's hard for sometimes I feel like I should just shut up and play, but I do feel I've gotten a lot of feedback that telling the stories behind some of the songs is actually good, and enjoyable.
When when I was playing folk music, we used to have what we called patter. That was the word back then, and it was you'd introduce the songs and hopefully in a humorous way, and it doesn't matter how serious the song was, you'd still try to get a little humor in there and stick it in there a little bit, and and um, and and when I got to classical, the whole Segovia format, which is very 19th century, was you walk out on stage, take a bow, you sit down, play, and don't talk, you know, and then you get up and take a bow and leave, and that was about it. So the idea was that the only thing that really mattered was the music. That the music was, and everything else. I mean, if you look at Segovia, for example, in the videos, uh, stoic uh, to the nth degree. I
Yes,
mean,
absolutely.
there's absolutely no emotion in his face, either joy or sadness. It is just,
I think he even said in an interview one time, I don't know if this was in English or in Spanish, but I think he said something to the effect of that he wanted to be as stoic as possible so that all of the emotion would flow through the fingers and not through the face.
and again, that's a very, very 19th century thing. But I remember reading articles from magazines from back then that musicians who did show emotion on stage were roundly criticized. So,
Really?
so yeah. And I remember, oh gosh, back in let's say in the mid '80s, James Galway, the great flutist, came to town and was in East Lansing, and was in concert with the Lansing Symphony. And I had a friend who was a flutist and taught flute. She was finishing up her doctorate at Michigan State, and so she couldn't hardly. I mean, she's practically jumping out of her skin to go see him. And I saw her a couple of weeks later after the program and asked her, and she said, "Well, he played really great." She said, "But he was so unprofessional because he talked to the audience."
Really?
And I'm thinking,
Interesting.
you're talking about James Galway. Who the heck are you to say? I didn't say that to her, but because I wanted to preserve the friendship. But that said, I mean, yeah, it's like, man, that's not a good thing to say. It's not a good way to believe.
Yeah.
And that's changed. Itzhak Perlman talks. I mean, he speaks when he's on stage, particularly during recitals,
Yeah.
and he was asked about that a number of years ago, and he said what happened. Of course, Perlman is he's mobility impaired, right? It's difficult, and so he was in a recital. He's playing, and he broke a string.
Hmm.
So his assistant walked out on stage and took the violin and went backstage to put a new string on. He says, "So there I am." He says, 2,500 people looking at me, and he says, "I'm just sitting there looking back." So he says, I started talking and just talked to him and told him some stories while we all waited. And he said, and I could feel the tension in the room just drop.
Hmm.
And people became way more relaxed. I became way more relaxed. And he said, and when I got my violin back and I continued, he said that was one of the best recitals I'd ever given.
Hmm.
And he says, and I haven't shut up since.
That's funny.
But I think there's for me, I don't think it's for everybody. I think audience, if you do it and you're natural at it, I'm a pretty chatty guy. So if you're natural at it, I think you can sit there and talk to the audience. And you seem to be pretty comfortable doing that. And I don't think you can do it just off the top of your head. I think you have to have some. You don't have to rehearse it, but I mean, you have to have some outline of what you're going to say in your mind. How am I going to introduce this, and what am I going to say? And if you do enough of play that same piece enough times, you start settling into a routine. So you do find yourself saying the same thing, but it's natural. It's your words, and it's natural speech.
Yeah, I think it helps if you have thought through the ideas behind it, especially if
Yes,
it's a song you've composed, right? I mean, at that
right,
point, hopefully, if you've composed it, hopefully before anything, you have something to say, and you've, in the process of putting those notes together, you've identified what is the message of this piece of music, so to speak. And then if you can identify those very clearly, I think what to say becomes almost just fully prescient. It's obvious.
right, right. Yeah. So, and the audience appreciates that. They like it. It makes you more personable. And again, it comes back to that intimacy. So instead of and and as you know, for the most part, most of us do not play to large crowds. We play to small audiences, and so instead of pretending that the small audience is a large audience, we just embrace it.
Right.
So and it's like and make it that kind of comfortable, and so and everybody, I think everybody ends up enjoying it a lot more that way.
I
So
love small audiences for that reason. Honestly, I probably will prefer to play small audiences the rest of my life. And that's one of the things I love about this instrument too. Is it is being so intimate. It works in settings where most music performance doesn't. I've played at coffee shops and different types of like 20-person rooms that would never have. I grew up playing metal music and rock and roll
ah,
music, so a
yeah,
very different experience. And I
oh
can
yeah,
invite my friends and family, and they're not gonna, their ears won't be ringing when they leave.
right, right. And so the other thing that we can do, and I've done it. I don't know if you have, house concerts. I've
Yes,
I've performed them. I've hosted them, and it becomes that's an entire event. It's not just the music. Then it's meeting the artists. A little wine and cheese afterwards, and just the whole thing becomes a very very nice evening or afternoon, depending. And again, and you don't have to. And for me, I always appreciate the fact I didn't have to amplify, just lugging gear around, and worrying about that kind of stuff. And I've done more than my fair share of that too. So, so you play? Do you play other types of events?
yeah. Last year was by far the most concerts I've done in a single year. It was hopefully I'm looking to scale back, but I definitely want to keep playing more classical guitar. I think I gave about 15 classical guitar concerts last year, and then there's about 20 other types, 25 other types with different ensembles, and then I'll do drums with a jazz group. Occasionally, I play electric guitar with some groups, and I'll cover down if a friend needs me to hop in, and then I play in a couple of larger ensembles, and then I recently started going back to school, so I'm playing in the school ensembles as well. So it's lots of different types of events, which has been a lot of fun. It's been a little exhausting holding all that music in my head, but the logistics of each one is so different. Thankfully, I haven't made any big errors, but it's hard to keep track of all the equipment that is needed for each one. Whereas the classical, you just show up with the instrument and you're pretty much good to go.
I played a lot of weddings and a lot of dinner parties for a lot of years, and a lot of background music and things like that. And I got it down to one small battery operated amplifier.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
actually have the same exact. That's what I'm rocking now too for the.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And I I tried using a pickup. I didn't care for the sound of the pickup. It was handy, because I didn't have to worry about a lot of things. But I settled on using a microphone, and got a little dicey in outdoor gigs. Every once in a while, the wind would get a little crazy. I overall I like the sound a lot, that way. But I had it all, down to the guitar and then the gear in a bag. The gear was all of the gear was in one bag and the guitar in the other, and it's just one trip. I played a wedding ceremony and cocktails afterwards, um, uh, and and it was an outdoor event, but there was also an indoor facility, and that's where they were going to do their dinner. And so they're going to do dinner, and then they were going to do dancing after that. And they'd hired a three-piece blues band. So while I'm playing cocktail music, the blues band is setting up. I see them carrying and amplifiers and PA and lugging stuff after stuff after stuff,
Yep.
and 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 so during the dinner, I'm packing up. I've played cocktails, and so I'm outside. I'm packing up, and all the guests are inside. And they're going to have dinner without music, and then they'll have the band play. And so the three guys are outside, and we're just shooting the breeze as I'm packing up, and they're amazed because I got
Yeah.
I've just got this small amount of gear,
One bag
and
out, and they made what, like 5, 6 trips or something.
yeah, 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 yeah.
That's
and,
funny.
and I don't know what they got paid, but I'm willing to bet it was significantly less than I did. And I mean, as a band, they probably got paid more, but
Right.
then they had to split it, So and I
Yeah.
thought, that's
It's tough. Yeah, I grew up playing in 4, 5, 6 person bands, and it's really hard. I mean, it was never something we could ever imagine paying a bill with, let alone all the bills. And
right.
honestly, for me, it never performing music was never entered my mind as a career path.
Hmm.
Um, it was something that seemed really awesome. A close friend of mine I grew up with, his name is Grant, and I got to see him at the summer camp we went to perform some like electric guitar at a talent show, and I thought it was just the coolest thing. I mean, I was like 9, and he was 10 or 11 or something, and my older friend, he's out there, he's shredding on the electric guitar. Everyone's all excited about it. I've never heard someone play like that in real life, and it just immediately captivated me. And the fact that my friend who like he just walked up there and did that blew my mind, and I just thought there's nothing I'd rather do than just go on a stage and just play guitar. At that point, I had pretty much quit guitar, but that got me back into it because when we went back to the dorm rooms, this camp was at like a college campus. We went back to the dorm rooms after, and he had the guitar, and he just handed it to me. He said, "Hey, you want to try it?" And I was like, "Really? You're gonna let me play this amazing thing I just saw you?" And yeah, he let me play it for like probably a ridiculous amount of time. I wouldn't put it down. And I was hooked since then. And then my goal in life just became get in a band, get on stage, and then I got very fortunate to meet some good friends and get to do that. After that point, everything else as far as performing is like gravy for me because as far as like a business goes, that's the teaching is where I'm focusing a lot of my attention.
Right. Yeah, as did I. I'm not even fully retired now from teaching. I still see about a dozen people a week, and there was a
And the
time when
ensemble, right?
I'm sorry.
And the ensemble.
Yeah, that's kind of a different critter, but yeah, I arranged music for that, and this was my second go around with ensembles. We had an ensemble in Lansing for many years, and I was arranging and conducting that as well, and then I left. Um, and this Brad DeRoche contacted me and wanted to know if I'd like to be a part of this, and I said yes. And it was just after the pandemic, but I was teaching prior to that. I was teaching so much I couldn't. When they first put that group together, which is 11 years ago now, I was invited, and I just couldn't do it. I was teaching 6 days a week, and then later it was like, well, I was teaching like 5 days a week, and I was doing weddings like 2 and 3 days a week.
Yeah.
It's just like, so I was always very, very, very busy, and so now I never go anywhere anymore. I used to live in a car. Now it's like,
Oh
my
man.
wife gives me grief because I never leave. I never go anywhere. But it's like, after years and years and years and years and years of constantly being on the go to go teach, so, and for me teaching, I mean, I can remember at one point I was teaching, gosh, I think about this for a minute. I had 3 classes. I had 2 ensembles, and 93 private students.
Wow.
And it wasn't in one location. I was teaching at 2 different colleges, Alma College and Olivet College. as well as a music store in Lansing and at home. So I mean, I was just in a car all the time going someplace,
That's
and
just 90 because I have close to 50, and I've gotten over 50 before, and I started getting a little hairy for me. That's I can't imagine juggling 90.
well, one of the things that I had to do is and before I just sit down and say, okay, let's play. What I started doing was I took a cue from my doctor, my physician. A guy come in and see me for 15 minutes, and he was out to the next one, and he spent all day doing it. And I thought, how do you keep up? Well, I realized I got a chart. He's he's writing all this stuff down, and so I thought, okay, that's what I started doing with each and every student. I kept a chart. I would write in what we were working on, and how long we'd worked on it, and comment, particular comments and things like that. Put stuff down, and that was the only way I could keep track of that, and a few other tricks to keep it going, but it just on the go constantly. Yeah, and I was wore out. Just
How long did
wore
you do that for?
I'm sorry?
How long did you do that for?
Decades.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, probably 30
12
years.
gotta feel like nothing then by comparison.
Oh, yeah. I used to do it. I used to do 18/20 a day.
Yeah, wow.
So like 12 spread out over 4 days.
Hey, it's beautiful work though.
It is because I'm still in contact with a lot of these people. I've got
Yeah.
students in my schedule who are children of children that I taught.
Wow.
So, somewhere along the line, I must have done something right. I've got several former students who are pros. Brad DeRoche is a former student of mine.
Really?
Let's see, Mark Cruz. I don't know if you know that name. Mark is he's a fingerstyle guitarist, but he plays an Ovation double neck, and he plays both necks at the same time, taps both necks simultaneously. He was, oh gosh, what year was that? 2012, maybe something like that. He was Guitar Player Magazine's Guitarist of the Year that year. And
I need to
so,
look them up.
yeah, Kroos, Mark Cruz, great guy, nice guy. And so anyway, but I've had a couple of other people so Dan Matheny, not Pat Metheny, the last name is spelled different, but Dan Matheny, and he was a guitar player for a group called Verve Pipe, and and they had a couple of big hits, and he's
I've heard
toured a
them.
lot. He's toured a lot. So I've had a few people like that, and a number of others who are um, um, mostly teachers now and do things. Yeah, and I've been very very lucky that they're out there. They're making a living
Yeah.
with the guitar in their lap, and they're kind of going on from there. So that's cool. But I've had so many others that I've just been very happy about they'll never be pros, but they've worked hard, and music will be a part of their life forever.
Yeah.
And you make these connections with people. And honestly, I think it's a life well spent. I'm looking at it backwards now through the rearview mirror, and I have to say, I mean, there's any number of things that I could have done from a career, but I think this is not a bad way to have gone through life. Is being nice to people and hanging out with people and teaching them how to play music and enjoy themselves, and children, and stories to tell.
Yeah.
I funny stories and poignant stories. I was talking about this the other day. A little girl who was. Most parents don't think their young children are going to succeed. They hope they will, but they deep down inside, it's just another. Because children they want to try everything, and then they fail at almost everything too, and that's a natural part of childhood. And but if you're the parent of that child, it's a little frustrating. And I'm a little girl about 7 years old, and she'd been with me since she was 5. And so she's playing a simple Renaissance piece by Adrian Leroy, and she's burning it up. She's sitting there like a pro, And her dad, he looks like a linebacker. This guy's massive, he, and he's a big, big, big guy, and he's sitting there watching his little girl do this, and he's got tears in his eyes. He just can't believe it, So, yeah, so that's a nice way to go home at night.
Yeah, man. That's yeah, because you're doing it's just beautiful work, and yeah, I am really happy that I've stepped in. I'm only 5 years into this work, and if I get to accomplish half of what you've described, I feel like I'll feel the same way, that it's a life well spent, and being able to facilitate that connection. I mean, music as a profession is just one facet of it, and what it gives us, I think, is so much more than that. It's so much more than a job or a career.
That's
Like
a
it's
calling.
yeah, and for even for people who never get beyond a couple of method books, and they just I've had a lot of, you've probably can tell me plenty of stories, and I have some of my own of students coming back later in life to an instrument, and universally they wish they hadn't put it down, or they remember very fondly that connection they have with that instrument, and it stays with them for forever.
Absolutely, it does. I've never had anybody say, "Gosh, I wish my parents hadn't made me play guitar."
Yeah,
I've never heard that. And I've taught thousands of people, and I run into these people as adults, and I've never heard them say, "Yeah, if it wasn't for my mom and dad, I wouldn't have had to play that guitar."
yeah,
That's just you, or piano, or flute, or any. I mean, you just never, ever, ever hear that. So, I think that. As we take a look, particularly with guitar, and the business itself is changing drastically. And I think one of the things, and I've spoken about this with a number of people over the years, that the area that we are suffering in as classical guitarists is we don't teach chamber music enough, and we
yeah.
don't promote it enough.
I wanted to
And
ask you about that, how you approach it, because you have your guitar ensemble.
yeah,
I feel like that's very important for the future of this instrument, and appreciation of it is to have that group community aspect.
well, one of the things that I've done, and I haven't done it very well, but I have done it, is when I'm working with children who are, say, middle school or such, I try to convince them to get with their friends who are playing flute or clarinet or something like that in the band program. Say, sit down and play some Christmas songs with them. You got chords, the melody is all laid out there in these Christmas books. Get together and make some racket. And a few of them have, and they've just really enjoyed it. So it's not, and you try to tell them, it's like being in a band, you know,
Yeah,
and so get them early, instead of late. When you start talking to them at college age, I've taught college for many years, and you start talking to them at college age, it's almost too late. It feels almost like another mountain that has to be climbed. When you're talking about a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old that's just banging out chords with their friend, and their friend is playing a flute and playing Silent Night or something like that, that's just hanging out with your friends and making music. And that's the attitude that you want to convey. It's just that, just get together, and if you have a sleepover, get the instruments out and make a little racket for a half an hour. You don't have to do it all night. Just spend a few minutes to see what happens. So I remember I had three girls that all studied with me, and they were all friends. One had started, another one really liked it, so she started, and because those two were doing it, the third one had to do it. That it was that kind of thing. And they were getting pretty good because they were kind of competitive a little bit, trying to keep up with each other.
yeah, that's great.
And so anyway, they decided to have a and the parents all knew each other. They were all homeschooled, so they decided they were going to have a little Saturday afternoon get together, all three girls, and so one of the moms hosted it, and then there was lemonade and Kool-Aid, and I probably popped popcorn, just nice afternoon with the young girls, and they were, I want to say 13, 14 years old, thereabouts, So they got together. They were excited. They had it planned for a week and a half, and they were all excited and went and did it. And so I asked them afterwards how it went. Oh, it was a lot of fun. We laughed and did this and did that, and we played these songs together. And I had given them a few things that they could play that were written for three parts, and, Oh, and and we had, and part of the time we were actually playing at the right place at the right time. Part of the time.
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah, and I got to believe, from a musical standpoint, it probably sounded like a train wreck, but they were just falling down, having the time of their life, and they ended up
Oh
doing
yeah.
it some more. And there was no goal in mind of trying to put together a band or try to do a performance or any of that, Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney. Hey,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
It's
it was just sitting down and making music. And if you can do that at that age, then when they get to be in their 20s, the idea of sitting down and playing with other musicians doesn't feel as daunting. And so things along those lines have gotten better than they were when I was starting out, but we've still got a long way to go. You know, but you start young. You find
yeah.
find 'em young and find uh, uh, you know simple things. And again, like I say, if it's just a simple melody line and some chords, and just learning how to do that, you know, doesn't have to be complicated. And one of the things that I've it's always kind of fun to, tell the boys, 13-year-old boy, 14-year-old boy, I bet there's a girl in your school that plays flute.
Yeah.
That can be a motivating factor totally at that age.
Yeah, it definitely, I remember it crossing my mind when I was 11, 12 years old. But it's funny you mentioned that. There's a that's so true, and I definitely have had some success. Not with my classical guitar students yet, but with my students who have other focuses, getting them encouraged to go find bands in their middle schools, high schools. But it reminds me of the story you mentioned about, I don't know if you've ever seen it, Wynton Marsalis, an excerpt of one of his speeches. He was speaking about, I can't remember how he phrased it, but it was either something about the best experience he had was the worst band that he's ever been a part of. And as a musician, the best experience. And he said it was the worst thing your ears could ever, the worst thing you could imagine. These little young kids, and he was one of them, and they had never touched an instrument, none of them. They were all elementary age, and the band director handed them a bunch of instruments, just kind of selected, you're going to play the tuba, you're going to play the trumpet, you're going to play the trombone, and then he just encouraged them to all play and just make whatever sounds they possibly could, and they were all, just without a care in the world or any possible preconceived notion, just making some sounds out of these instruments. And the band director, when they all got done playing, he said that was amazing. You guys were great. And then he went on to describe how like that trombone player was this famous guy you've heard of, and that that saxophone player was this other guy that you've heard of. They all went on to love music for the rest of their life because they
Sure.
had that permission to get together and do it.
Yeah, we as teachers, we are cheerleaders, and you've got to present that positivity all the time, because it's easy to step on that dream hard and squash it right where it's at, and it's totally unnecessary. Some
How do
of
you balance that positivity with? I agree 100%, and I wonder if you have any comments on how to balance that positivity with, especially someone who wants to be serious, with an adherence to like technical excellence and looking for faults in your own playing.
Yeah, I think one of the things, number one, the thing that's helped me is the fact that I'm self-taught, and so I recognize a struggle. I tell people that you don't have to take lessons to get good at this. If you don't mind spending 20 years to do 5 years worth of work, and but I remember a lot of the struggles, and so I think that shows up quite a bit. I don't think I tell people that we need to do it better. That's kind of harsh. I think if it's not right when you're playing. I don't need to tell you that because you already know it, right? And there are little things you say, okay, what we need to do here. I don't have to tell them you did this wrong. I don't like that word very much, but I can see where, for example, they're not connecting the phrases particularly well. You get this in this measure we've got 8/8 notes, and next measure we got a couple of quarter notes, And so they play the eighth notes and stop, and then they play the quarter notes, and teaching them how to do this and say, okay, right here, what we need to do is don't pause on this, just, and give very clear instruction on what to do without necessarily saying this is going to make it better or what you did was wrong. And so you try to keep judgment out of it and at the same time explain what we can do to, this is what we need to do right here. And so, but yeah, I don't like to say, well, that was terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we don't want to start there.
No. You say, okay, that sounds nice. Now we can make it just a wee bit better, and so you're not really telling them they're making mistakes. That you're telling them that they did a good job, and they usually do. I mean, and that's part of it. When I see a 5-year-old, I've got a 7-year-old right now that's just learning and playing, Hot Cross Buns and Mary Had a Little Lamb and things like that. And I have them listen to it as much as possible. I'll give them a recording. I'll record the music for them, and say, listen to this, and then try to imitate that, and try to get them to that stage right off the bat. So, and then say, okay, what we need to do right here. This sounds good. What you've done is really good so far. We just need to finish. So it's not like you did something wrong. It's not quite complete. And they generally speaking, most students will understand that it doesn't sound as they're playing it doesn't sound as good as the way I played it. So I say, okay, this is what I do right here, and so this is how you can do it too. And every once in a while, and I've said this particularly with the early classical stuff, I've said to this to several students. I said, you played this song really terrific. You did a nice job on it. Okay, fine. But I said, there is no reason why you can't play that better than me. And they look at me like, what? Play better than the teacher? That concept is so foreign. And I say, yeah, every note there's nothing there you don't know. And I never practice it. So if you practice it, you will be better than me at it. And that reality right there is such a shock to the system, And some will rise to, and some don't. Some they play a little bit every other day, and that's that.
It's not always about being great at the instrument either.
No, it's about having fun.
Yep.
And if you're having fun doing it that way, so whatever, it really is. And with young children, they just want to have fun. I don't teach them chords right away with young children. I teach them melodies, play single note melodies.
Yeah, I learned pretty quickly you can't give chords to a 5-year-old.
Well, it's too abstract.
Yeah, and too difficult on the hand.
It's right. It's physically demanding. It's too hard. And then when you got it right, it doesn't sound right. It's like, so what do I do with a C chord or a G chord or whatever it is?
Right.
Or even an E minor chord. So, okay, now I can play an E minor chord. So what? It doesn't sound like a song. But if I teach them Hot Cross Buns and Mary Had a Little Lamb and things like that, that sounds like a song, and they can sing along with that. So I have a little girl right now. That's all she wants to do is play. She's, how old is she? 10, and that's all she wants to play is just melodies, and she plays them and sings them. But it's one note at a time. She doesn't want, and her brother also plays, and he plays chords and sings. And and he's only a year older, and I've offered. She has absolutely no desire. She just wants to play them. Are you having fun? Yep. Okay, we're good. Yeah. And she's playing some complicated things.
Yeah,
and she's reading music.
That's amazing, though, to connect the voice to the guitar. I think that's hard to do for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I had a hard time thinking about it that way, and if you listen to any other type, especially wind players, they'll always talk about that you're singing through your instrument, and it's
right.
So clear. Guitarists get a little disconnected from the voice, which is the foundation of our musical expression.
Exactly. So what projects you got coming up?
Yeah, there's plenty. Well, I'm still actively rolling out the Sketches of Michigan. I mean, I'm a one-man show as far as that goes. So I have sheet music coming, CDs, vinyl, all that stuff. It was mastered at Third Man Records, so thankfully I was able to get a nice high-quality vinyl master. So I'm finishing rolling that out. every 6 months, I have this long schedule of compositions, and they're all, being worked on pretty simultaneously. And
Uh-huh.
I time them out where each one, they don't always go according to plan, of course. It's composing, it's not
Yeah.
it's not a math equation, but it's every 6 months is my aim, and my next set is it's a set of three. This is actually the first time I've really talked about it to anybody, but it's a set of three chamber pieces, one for woodwinds, one for brass, and one for strings, as I'm slowly getting my compositional skills geared towards a larger orchestral work. And each one is a set of three movements, and they're all thematically linked, and I'll leave that for when I get ready to release it. But then
Now,
after that,
when you physically, when you're writing this stuff out, are you a pen and paper kind of guy, or are you do electronically, or how do you do that?
every process has been, I try to switch up the process a lot. I find I get a very different result by experimenting with the process, and I'm never doing like I said, this is my fourth album, and I did the Sketches of Michigan completely differently than anything I had tried before, and I get the chance to reset my thinking when I change the process, and,
Right.
and this time around, um, I do rely on voice memos a lot, so I'll record a lot of ideas that I sing or that I'll catch when I'm playing, especially shockingly, maybe like a fourth of the melodies out of this album came out of, I'll be doing my scale practices, and I can't help but my mind is, get out of the scale, here's a melody. It draws me towards
Ah,
some kind of idea from that, and then I can explore that for some length of time. And then I was going into Dorico on my laptop for this album, and I made sure that I transcribed everything out as I was going. The only thing I'm waiting on to publish it is the fingerings and making sure it's properly legible for people. But then a lot of like I said, my ensemble works. I've made a lot of the music just in the computer, in the DAW, the digital audio workstation. So I'll work on the music that way. I'll compose it by recording it, more or less.
gotcha.
And sometimes I have written it out on pen and paper, but honestly, I'm not a big fan of writing by hand. It just doesn't work for me.
Neither am I. I find that I use I use notation. I use actually MuseScore, and I
Yeah.
lay it out with that, and so just kind of go through it and do my arranging that way. I've done a lot with pen and paper, and I'm glad that part of my life is over.
Yeah, man, we already use our hands too much as it is, so
So
just
yeah,
playing the instruments.
that's
But
fun.
I do have more guitar music coming up. So like this summer, I'm gonna put out those ensemble pieces. But I'm working on, and I'm close to being finished with my next classical guitar set, which will be coming out next winter, around December.
Oh, cool.
And that's going to actually be a bunch of student pieces, so 2 minutes or less, designed for recitals, relatively graded. I'm working with Scott Walter and a few other people to ensure that they're level appropriate, and then there'll also be duets and trios and quartet arrangements, and
Awesome.
I'd like to contribute to the ensemble. We're talking about. I'm really fascinated by what you've been able to build with your ensemble, and I definitely, at some point, either talking more today or another time, I'd love to hear more about what type of repertoire guitar ensembles are looking for, and how to design those well. Because it's one thing to
Gotcha.
make a compelling piece of music; it's another thing to make it inclusive and fun to play for a group.
Right. So, and believe it or not, we are out of time, sir. We
Oh
just
wow,
kind
that flew by.
of it does, doesn't it? Isn't that amazing? So anyway, I really want to thank you for taking the time to do this with me, and I'm looking forward to hearing your new stuff, and I'm enjoying going back and listening to your old. So
Thank you, Roger. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure to get to meet you and play with the Mid-Michigan Classical Guitar Society. I mean, if for anyone listening to this, I can't emphasize enough how important it is, people like yourself fostering community around these things we care about, and I really look up to you guys for that. And thanks for having me on and getting to talk a little bit about what I do.
thanks, David. We'll talk soon. Bye bye.
Take care.
I'd like to thank David for taking the time to come on the show. If you'd like to know more about him, you can find a link to his website in the descriptions below. I'd like to thank you too for taking the time to listen. If you enjoy these podcasts, please share your favorite episodes with your friends and introduce them to Creative Conversations with Roger Humphrey.